Okay.
Just putting my shirt on.
Hi, everybody. Okay, Sam, you want to keep the shirt on or off?
No, I'm putting my shirt on.
Okay, so hello. We're going to do a quick 25 minutes, last questions, wrap up today. Sam, you're going to do some questions from. Hey, Sam, you want to keep the shirt on or off?
No, I'm putting my shirt on.
Okay, so hello. We're going to do a quick 25 minutes, last questions, wrap up today.
Someone has a quick stream on.
Me, my bad, sorry.
Okay, cool. We're going to do quick questions. Sam, you start off with the questions that were in per chat from to Gagonia. And yeah, please. Okay,
great. So we had a couple of questions for Kagonia about the 360 videos. And she said, unfortunately, she signed a consent, or the participant signed a consent form, so she can't share any of that material, unfortunately. And then we had another question regarding examples of knowledge which transfers from the rural to the urban areas. And she sent me a list, including herbal medicine. So, I mean, we don't have time, but BM could probably talk about that. So you often see like stands in the city with like traditional herbal medicine being sold in an urban context. Table banking, very common in Kenya and other African countries, locally known as chamas. The care of certain diseases is informed by food and dietary information from rural communities and traditional cultural practices. Clothing, art and dance, e.g. African cloth dance styles, which even now trends on TikTok and Instagram. And then last one would be Harambe and Ubuntu culture. And then regarding the question, does it mean Kagonia Awori proposes using Silicon Valley technology to challenge Silicon Valley ideologies, which is, I think, from you, Hans? She answers, no, not at all. Instead, using Afrocentric knowledge and technologies to challenge Silicon Valley ones. For example, in gaming in the West, the idea of social is one where one player sits at their home and plays an online game with other players online. What's quite popular here, especially in peri-urban and rural areas, is gaming lounges, where participation involves one person on the game and his peers around him, and participating in the game as an active audience. Also, one can play solo online, but amongst other solo players. So it's group activity, but consisting of collocated individual players. So yeah, just some quick responses there. I would now move on and ask BM a couple of the questions. We had a number of questions which were collected in the chat, but we don't have that much time here, so I will just make a selection. What would you, okay, this is one which I thought was really interesting. What would you say to the idea that we ourselves are being played, like an Atari game, by advertising platforms and their recommender algorithms? So that one goes out to you, Bethuel.
I think there are many people, I think there are people who've studied and even written about this over time, the idea that we're in a game or we're being played. And I feel also that idea that even in colloquially, that when someone says, I feel like I've been played, it's someone is taking advantage of me. So that question of what kind of playing is it? So, and I feel in a certain sense that happens. So like when we talk about like between the gambling and loan apps, all they do is they keep people in a certain loop, and I feel that you lose, and it's just like a game. You put in more money, and like you get more lives. So yeah, there is a kind of more game like that.
Then I would ask a follow-up question there, maybe. No. Well, I mean, I think actually you maybe answered most of these questions which are there. So I would then move on to a question of my own, which was, I felt like you kind of left us on a cliffhanger at the end. You opened up so many questions about time, betting, the future and the present, and like for me, you kind of tantalized me with this idea of poetry understood in its broadest possible way, and play. It's not a concrete question, but could you maybe expand a little bit upon that? Like, because I understand you describe yourself as a poet. You work also in different forms, in different media as well. So how do you see a little bit like your relationship also, like maybe for are there questions of agency also which can be addressed in terms of the sort of creative skills or the creativity that you can marshal, and how that gives you a relationship with these systems and structures and technologies?
Okay, so yes, I think like for a while now I've stuck to that idea of like I prefer. There's a lot of things I do, but I'd put them under the general ban of poetry, and from the Greek poesis and the idea of making and all that. So, and that for me is also a form of consciousness. So, I think with the question of like, we think about time, and in any kind of making, there's the time of the composition, the time in the composition. And so, which breaks away from our regular thing we do, from what is our quotidian everyday life. So in that space, I feel I speculate there might be some emancipatory thing that might be happening there, because by having the time to think about things, to question and to play, I think the idea of play is very important. I was listening to something this week about like the distinctions between playing and gaming, and the idea of the structure that surrounds the thing, and also that you can play with a material, you play with water, but there will be a swim in which a stroke that has a kind of structure, and now that becomes a game, and in a certain form even goes into sport where there's spectatorship. And so I'm interested, I think the idea of like poetry, but I'm also very keen in the question of language, because I feel some of the way I like that technology has its very useful things, and we shouldn't just like make it look like it's all bad or demonizing, but also how can it be used to generate different things or forms that we have not exhausted. Because something that has been happening is we've had questions of truth and fake news and whatever. So the question of what you say and how we receive it, I feel so if by taking time to either read together, to study together, there's something that happens that, especially when it's done in community, there's something that we slow down, first of all, because people have to take in whatever is being said. And then there's something like it's a cognitive rain. When it rains and you're inside a house, even the body changes. You feel a certain kind of way. You want to be comfortable. And so I feel like that's what art can do, and that's what art does. And by doing that, it also, because when I was thinking about speculation, there's also the idea of like you have speculation in art. How does art speculate versus financial speculation? And I feel that's where the poetry comes in. It's a thing with different forms, different people come with it in different ways. So I hope that kind of answers your question.
Yeah, I mean, it does. It also poses a whole lot of other questions, but I'll put those on hold for the moment, and maybe pass it over to Hans, because I think Hans wanted to ask Oscar a couple more questions, and then we see how we are for time. Just want to make sure to distribute equitably our time. Exactly.
Thanks. I would like to maybe put 2 comments first on BN because I made some notes, and then I'll come, and maybe BN, if you want to answer, obviously, please do so. But when you talked, I was thinking about that that the betting success is really. I was thinking about gamification and play in this context because betting success decides if you eat or not. Yeah, if you cannot afford transport or school. So the game has like a massive real life impact. And then I ask myself, how is it the other way around? How does betting behavior, how is it fueled? Is it fueled by poverty? And is it fueled by the human thrill for gambling and entertainment? You know, like because we know how it works, like social media, slot machines, we know the neurological triggers. It's very human. It's deeply rooted in human biochemistry and neurophysiology that we like that and that makes us happy and that we're looking for this thrill. And at the same time, here it's merged with sometimes extreme difficult life situations where you basically gambling on the outcome. And then I was thinking about the loop. It's kind of, so when you say the present is shaped by the future, yeah, the future paybacks fucks you today, basically. So you take the money now, but then you will owe more, you know, in the future. But you will not earn more. But you think you will earn more through the gambling. But the gambling corporations operate on profit, so logically you lose. It's kind of, I mean, I'm just repeating basically what you said, but it's kind of it's a real mindfuck. It's really. How do you feel when you look at these systems? What is your gut reaction to that? Do you like it? I mean, it also has a certain beauty if you pervert it, or I mean, and that's not too bad for an artist. But what do you say?
I think that's where even the interest comes from, is seeing how it has. Yeah, as you said, it has real life implications very fast, and how many people have gotten involved. People I know, in places I go through. And I think to answer the question is, there's the question of there's conditions in which people live in, the material conditions people have right now, the poverty, and not being able to cover the costs of living. And of course, there's also thrill, because once you get in and you win a couple of times and you see, so there's an option, and now it becomes, I think that's the thing, it's like a bait, you're hooked, and now you just keep going in the loop. So I think the question for me is, and it's a big concern, is how do we get out of like these cycles? Because something else will come, things will change, and probably because sports is something that's big, that will continue, but there'll be different things that will come up. But how do we think about this question of owning our time, of having what I sometimes refer to as having the present in the present? Because it almost feels like we've been robbed of our present, and so that's a big concern, and it's also a very political thing.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, that is important. Yeah. Maybe a comment also to Oscar, another one, and then a question. Just one thing I forgot to say before. For me, is like if you train people to behave in a certain way, it might sound bad, but it's, from my point of view, it is not, because it's a normal thing. It's what happens everywhere. We have to, if we ask the question for businesses, we have to ask it overall. What are schools? My daughter just graduated from high school. It's 12 years of hell for an autistic person. It's not. It's insane. Yeah. So I'm not judging here. I'm asking, or the military, or all different forms and society. My demand would be that government oversight is being exercised if private corporations are using basically manipulation and training of people, because it cannot be left to private corporations. I would be interested in what you think about that. I'm a clear advocate for state-run businesses and for limitation of private enterprise. but that's my ideology basically. But my question for you would be a question of, I know that you told me that you are also using venture capital for the company. And I would like to know, how do you balance the paradigm of venture capital, which is basically, as I understand it from Silicon Valley, is a big issue. It's a problem because it's about growth, basically about growth. How do you balance that with your responsible business practices that you talked about? And that is the tricky question. How does it represent in the board? Because in the end, it comes down to who actually owns the company and who can hire, fire, and make the crucial decisions. Hire and fire the CEO and make the crucial decisions in the company.
Okay, thanks for the question, Hans. Yeah, like we started as a technology company, and we have received funding from different investors. And what I think that it's important to keep in mind is that Ogaru would have not been possible without these investments. These are means that we have found that in general, that for example, when you have something that requires a lot of research, something that you are not sure that is going to have like some return in the near term, you need to take these bets. And it's funny that we're talking right now with BM about like betting, but this is a statistical thing that somebody needs to fund, for example, the research. And that happens, for example, government sometimes funding research in academia. Likewise, for certain type of businesses, you need some investments, some heavy investments in the beginning. For example, a technology company that produces chips, you need to buy a lot of things before you actually sell the first one, you know. And if you come to kind of disruptive and innovative companies where you don't even know if the market is right for that, you'll certainly need to put like some money. And the person who is putting this money, these investors, their expectation is to get more money, and that makes sense, you know, because if not, like, why would they do it, you know? So I think it's, in the end, it's going again a habit for the fundamentals. If you use that money to actually create value, so that you can actually pay back more money because you did create something that the market wanted. It's a win-win situation, you know, like that's the idea that you need. Yeah, I'm putting a bet, but these people are using this money responsible to experiment, create a company, grow a company up to a point where then it pays back to the investors, and it pays back to the customers with the services it provides and the employees and all of this. However, of course, like this, sometimes this can go wrong, you know, and depends also on the type of company that you are building. How much money are you putting in, with what expectations of what returns that makes sense? Like, and there is something that I think it's important to think about it. For example, if actually you build a technology company that solves a very deep problem, now with COVID, like the companies that actually have created a vaccine, for sure they should have spent a lot of money like researching that, but they're creating something that is really needed in the world at some point, you know. So what I mean is that yes, like sometimes there are some investments that can put like some incentives that are not right for the company that you're building. Sometimes they can put like some pressure to, hey, I put so much money that I'm expecting a huge return, that if you don't do this, you actually go to a worse place. But what I think is that in the end, even if there could be like these bubbles on something, you do need for certain organizations like this funding. And if you use it responsibly, and if you're thinking underneath, what am I doing? What am I using this money for? And how I'm gonna create more value to this? It should make sense. But yeah, like of course, cases have been that money is not being used in a right way. and maybe putting pressure on some things. And just to touch a bit more on that point, it is for some type of companies that they always that they're looking for this growth and this type of very big markets. I would argue that there are many companies, probably most of the companies, that are fine serving like smaller markets, and that's okay. If you're an entrepreneur that you're building a company that have 3 employees, but they are happy and they are doing their thing, that's a perfectly functioning part of society, you know? Not every business has to grow like crazy and be like the biggest one. That's it. So it's for some type of companies, and you need to ask yourself that.
Thanks, Oscar. Sam, do you have some, are there some last questions from the audience to BM?
No more questions, just a couple of comments. So I don't think there are things we need to really discuss here. So
Okay.
perhaps we could then close up the session.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. So I would like to close it with just one direction that I was thinking that so many things that we talked about today can actually be experienced and simulated and learned about in games. So because the game ecology is so vast, and there is a very high diversity in games next to basically blockbuster a game industry. That is not what I'm talking about. That may be just as a thought. And the second thought is that during the week we were running a seminar, a blog seminar on gamification and play. Maybe tomorrow in the second session we can very, very briefly talk about that, because there we went very abstract into a lot of discussions about reality and perception and neurological aspects. So maybe to look at that. Now we're going to close. Thank you so much, BM, Oscar, Cagonia. Thanks to the whole team who made it possible. Thanks, Sam, to you for organizing everything and making everything possible. And we're going to meet tomorrow at 2 p.m. on the same channel, Twitch channel, for another session. We're going to have, let me quickly, you can see it on the Twitch channel. You can see the schedule. We're going to have Cynthia Chepkemoy, we're going to have Stefan Köhn and Nestor Sire, and we're still looking. Hison Young is very ill at the moment, so we are looking how to do that. If we're going to do her presentation, we'll figure it out. I will let you know tomorrow. Thanks so much, and goodbye. Sam?
Just to concur, thanks. Also, just a couple of shout outs to the Academy, to Madhu for initiating, for Clara for all the oversight, and of course there's a whole team there, but just those in particular. And on our side to Jacob and Luca for making the whole technical stuff run. We're extremely grateful. And last but not least, the discussants, BM, Oscar, Cagonia, and Hans. Thanks so much, guys. Looking forward to seeing you all tomorrow. Have a good evening.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Ciao.
Ciao.
Ciao.